Hi, hello, and welcome to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. This is going to be a super quick watercolor tutorial for how to make a rock or a couple rocks with a little bit of reflection. This is a great tutorial to follow along if you're hoping to add some rocky elements to some landscapes and maybe add in a little reflection to it. I want to keep this as simple as possible, so I'm only going to be using one brush, a round brush, size 12, a piece of paper, some water, and Payne's Gray. It's the only color I'm using in this. You can adapt this to add more colors or a different color, but I want to keep it simple. I gathered my supplies, taped my piece of paper down because that's always super helpful, and now I want to actually make a nice light gray color. I do this by taking a damp or wet brush and dipping it straight into my Payne's Gray, then adding little bits of water to my brush and mixing it in a little bit at a time to get a nice light gray color. Then I want to make a rock type shape. Rocks are natural, nature is imperfect, so just make kind of an interesting blob shape, but since we're setting this kind of in some water and hinting to the fact that it's sitting in there, you want these to be flat on the bottom. While it's still wet, dip into your slightly more concentrated version. We want to build a couple layers of some different elements of dark and light so that there is some hints to texture on this rock. While they're still wet, we want to go in with a little more saturation. So actually dip your brush into the Payne's Gray pot so you can get some real saturated Payne's Gray on there, and concentrate that in a few different areas, especially on the bottom. You want to leave some areas with that initial color. You want to hint at some cracks and some craggy areas and make this have a little more texture by adding color while it's wet. If you're thinking this looks a little extreme at first and not super rocky, it's okay. This does settle down as it dries. But before we actually go on and add black to all of this, we want to just take a little break and actually start the beginnings of the reflection. We're going to do this in a few layers, but this is how we're going to start. We're going to wash our brush off and then tap it off just a little bit because we just want it to be wet, damp, but not dripping. And then take that damp brush and just swipe it horizontally and grab a little bit of that pigment from the base of all of those rocks. You're going to lose a little bit of the form here, but that's okay. What we're trying to do is hint to the shadows that these rocks might be actually reflecting on the water or just reflecting the mirrored image of these rocks, but we don't want it to be perfect. We don't want to repaint the exact same thing because typically that's not how water looks unless conditions are absolutely perfect. Wait for this to soak in a little bit and saturate your brush with some pretty decent amount of pigment. Then again, we're going to touch at the base and try to define some of these areas on this rock a little bit further. At this point, the bottom part of your paper is still going to be pretty wet, so as you touch the bottom of the rock, it will start to bleed a little bit into that water, and the rock that you have will probably be a little bit more dry, so you can start to actually add a little more definition to some cracks or crags on it. After you add those details onto the rocks, the reflection might be a little set, so you can again take a clean brush that's wet or damp and just swipe a little bit on there, maybe even swipe a little bit out to hint to a few little ripples. We don't need to really over-analyze this, we just need to hint to some ripples because the imagination is super powerful. In this, I work back and forth between the rock and the reflection to kind of manage how dry one part is at a time. And if you end up with some harsh lines you don't like too much before they dry, just go ahead and wash your brush off and then use some extra water to kind of smudge them out just lightly. To finish these off, concentrate the darkest colors right at the base, right where the rock is meeting the water. That's going to help kind of hint more to that shadow and the horizon line, and just finesse this a little bit if you need to smudge out a little bit of that shadow so it looks a little more natural. If you want to add a few more ripples, go ahead and make those final adjustments. But that's really it. These simple little reflective rocks are super simple to do, and they're a great way to practice water control too. So I hope that you have fun doing this. Good luck, and I'd love to see how you apply these rocks into your future works. If you want to see more testing videos where I test out different variables for fluid painting, want to see any watercolor tutorials or some other art supply testing, subscribe to my channel. Or if you just want to see some of the art that I create, it's really varied. You can follow me either at Lacey Walker Art or at Rebel Unicorn Crafts on Instagram, or Rebel Unicorn Crafts on TikTok, where I make some funny videos as well as some tool talk videos. And I hope that you have a magically creative day.